Hello and welcome from Mexico City to this episode of Crossing Borders with Nathan Lustig, where I have conversations with entrepreneurs doing business across borders and the people who support them, with a focus on those with some connection to Latin America. This episode is brought to you by LatamList.com. If you like this podcast, you'll enjoy LATAM List's daily tech news reporting. Sign up for the weekly mailing list to get updates. My guest today is Julian Deutschle, a German entrepreneur who moved to Chile to start his business Recorrido, a company that allows people to book bus tickets online. After studying at university and working at a finance internship in his native Germany, Julian and a few of his friends took a trip to Latin America and were dismayed at not being able to book tickets online, and in some cases, not even being able to find bus schedules on the internet. We cover his friends' and family's reaction to his decision to move to Latin America to start a tech startup, why he started his business in Chile even after getting rejected from Start-Up Chile, and all of the challenges Julian and his team had to overcome to get their business off the ground. We also talk about why Latin America is a great place to start a business, working with traditional family-owned businesses, especially as foreigners, and how Julian thinks about Latin American startup ecosystem and how it's going to progress going forward. I hope you enjoy my conversation with Recorrido's Julian Deutschle. If you like this podcast, be sure to share it with a friend. Hey, Julian, welcome to the podcast. Thanks for being willing to do it.
Hi, Nathan. It's my pleasure.
Where are you in the world today?
I'm here in Santiago in our headquarters.
Where are you from originally? You don't sound like you're from Santiago.
Yes, I'm from Germany originally, south of Germany.
So tell me a little bit about your business. What are you up to?
So I'm the co-founder of Recorrido. Together with three friends from college, we founded Recorrido, which is reinventing the interurban bus industry in Latin America.
And what was the bus system looking like when you first were starting the business? And what does it look like now with your system?
Yeah, it was looking like there was no internet or any smartphone at all. So when you were traveling by bus, it was basically a separate ecosystem of what was happening with smartphones and e-commerce. So it seemed like really untapped, and the consequences in the end were that if you wanted to travel by bus, you had to go physically to the terminal in order to even have an idea if the route you're looking for is offered by any bus operator, and of course you had no chance of comparing different offers or at least prices. So it was really terrible in the beginning.
I remember accidentally booking my parents on a non-express bus in Chile for something that should have been like 2.5 hours, and it took them 6. And there just wasn't a way to compare back in, I guess, 2010, 2011.
Yes, definitely. So actually, surprisingly, you could book a ticket because when we started, as we know, foreigners couldn't even book a ticket because they didn't have the Chilean tax ID. So I figure you had a workaround for this, but we had thousands of requests from foreigners asking us how they can book any tickets without this tax ID.
Yeah, we figured out the workaround. At least at that point, we were just borrowing people's tax IDs, and it was working.
Yeah, yes, yeah, that's the most common one.
And I think the one of the most surreal moments I've had in Latin America was in Bolivia, going to a bus station, and it was this beautiful new structure that the government had built, and it sounded like there was the zombie apocalypse inside. And I was like, what is going on here? And we got inside, and there was probably about 50 people in this kind of domed place where it was echoing around, yelling out their bus schedules, and they did it all day every day, competing. And I'm going to try to find the video that I have, put it in the show notes later, but it was just incredible that was the way that people were buying tickets.
Yes, that's it's actually very unbelievable. So sometimes when we talk to people who haven't traveled by bus yet, and we explain how it's done today, they get into a mode of disbelief because they really don't think that something like this is possible or was possible a few years ago. But I think we have thousands of stories like this. So actually, also considering Bolivia as it's I think almost the worst example because they also sell tickets on with pen and paper. So if you imagine that today everybody has a smartphone and can do thousands of things with it, that they're still selling tickets on pen and paper.
It must be interesting to tell family, friends, and investors back in Germany about something that's so inefficient when the German system is stereotypically known for its efficiency. The talking about the disbelief. What was that like when you were first starting the business?
Yeah, actually, I think the same reaction. So extreme disbelief that something like this still exists in any part of the world, because at least considering smartphone penetration globally, I think the popular opinion is just that okay, at least things are resolved with a smartphone, but it's definitely not like this. So the reactions in Germany were pretty pretty extreme on the disbelief side.
So before we go more into the business, I want to jump back into you. So you're from the south of Germany. How did you get to Latin America?
Yeah, so I was born in south of Germany, but I always wanted to get to know other places, and it's very common in Germany that you leave your home very young. So with 19, I left my home and I moved to north of Germany in order to study business administration. And at that point, I met my co-founders, which were studying something similar, and since then we just had a great life being students and lived together actually since 2010. And afterwards, I think we were so brainwashed from our studies that we thought that the best thing we could do is start internships in Frankfurt, which is the like the Wall Street of Germany. For example, I was in M&A. My co-founders, they worked as consultants or as investment bankers. So that for us was basically the dream during our college years, but quickly we realized that it's not really fulfilling. And we thought that we have to do something else. And that time was a great timing because two of my co-founders, they traveled through Latin America and also got to know to Chile and heard about the program of Start-Up Chile. And then they came back to Frankfurt, told us about all the opportunities. Everybody's online, and we couldn't believe it, how much potential still is reaching. So we in the free time after working in our internships, we were thinking about a business plan. And right at that time, for the first time, more than half of the train tickets of Germany were sold online. So we were thinking that this is something that development which will come to Latin America sooner or later. So of course we have to be the driving force behind this. And then of course we applied to Startup Chile. Thought that's actually something they're desperately waiting on, and they rejected us because we didn't have any prototype. We were four non-programmers, so who's going to build the product? So they rightly so, I think they rejected us, but we were so convinced that we basically resigned from our internships. Although many of us received job offers, so we think next month already we flew to Chile because we were so convinced.
And did you fly to Chile knowing that you were going to make this happen with your own money, or did you find investors, or how did you get it started?
Yeah, so I think it was different. So in my case, for example, I took a bank loan from Germany. Actually, my father had to inscribe himself as well.
You had to co-sign it, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Had to co-sign it, and I think it was 3,000 euros, something like that. And we thought, yeah, with that at least what was my money I could put in. My friends, they had some savings also, did something like this. And we thought, yeah, that will give us a head start. But then when we arrived to Chile, we noticed that nobody wanted to rent us an apartment. And so we basically had to pay the rent for one whole year immediately. So all the money went out the window immediately, and nothing was left for building any business. But at that time, actually, we remained in great contact with our former bosses in Frankfurt, and they actually became the first angel investors.
So we met for the first time, I think, just after you had your first angel investors, when I got an email saying, we've gotten an angel investment and we have a very specific problem in Chile. What was that problem, and why was it such a big problem?
Yes, I mean it was incredible for us because I think we were just going to every bank we could see in the street, and actually we put on our suits and just to make a great impression. And nobody wanted to give us a bank account, so we had this angel investment, and we literally said we don't want any credit, we don't want anything from you. We just need a bank account in order to receive our first investment from Germany. Nobody wanted to give it to us. This was I don't know, it was a challenge we really didn't anticipate in the beginning. And so in the end, the angel investors we had, they sent them money to a Chilean friend on his personal bank account. And at that time, at least, exchange rate for euro to pesos was really bad for private persons. So what we did was we went to the bank of our friend and just took all the money in cash out of the bank, went to the center of Santiago in order to get the best exchange rate. And we, as you know, the pesos has a high denomination. So as you know, $1 is at around 670 pesos at the moment. So, which means is the highest bill in pesos 20,000. So in the end, with our angel investment, I think we had one backpack just full of cash, and and of course we were also a bit nervous because we were running around with all this cash. And so because being four, actually we planned everything out. So one was standing at the entrance of the bank, the other one was at the counter, and the other one was already getting a taxi. So it was all planned out to minimize any robbery.
I have a couple similar stories just like that where the bank would really just they knew that they had your money there and they thought, okay, this is captive money, we're going to really screw them on the exchange rate. And I just finally said, okay, give me it in cash, and it did the same thing and had friends set up the kind of security perimeter and walk down the street to the exchange with my dollars, then take it out in pesos and then deposit it back. It was a crazy time back in 2011, 2012.
Yes, definitely.
2013.
Actually, we did get a little bit screwed because between all these bills of 20,000 pesos, which I think would be 30, $25, there was one false bill. So of course we checked every bill, but in the end this slipped in, and so we got a little bit screwed on this one. But so it is.
Just the cost of doing business.
Yes, exactly.
So you finally get the angel investment in, you get a bank that's willing to at least receive the money via a friend and do this crazy thing to get the pesos. What was the first step with four Germans in Santiago starting a bus online ticketing business?
Yeah, actually, we were very naive back in Germany, so we thought that Chile, as a modern country, has already many people speaking English. So we arrived, nobody spoke English because we didn't know any Spanish. So I think the first thing in all minute of free time was just learning Spanish like crazy. So this was one huge challenge we had to overcome in the beginning. It worked, but of course you have to imagine it. I think in the early weeks we went to eat at something like McDonald's, and they were asking if we want to eat in the restaurant or have it to take it with us, and we didn't understand the question, so it was really that terrible. But I think just pushing ourselves to learn Spanish as fast as possible was very important. And on the other side, we had to quickly overcome our weakness that we were four actually just business guys and nobody really could develop our product. So we were very early on looking for a co-founder who then becomes the CTO. And actually we found a huge or we had huge luck finding our CTO, which actually also was German and had many years of experience and joined us as the founding team.
So once you've learned some Spanish, you've got your technical co-founder, what was the first step to get a business like this going? Because at the end of the day, it's basically a marketplace. You need the demand from the people to buy the tickets, plus you also need to convince bus companies to let you sell their tickets. How did you make that work?
Exactly. So we had this common chicken egg problem. So we knew that without any traction on the user side, it's almost impossible to convince the bus operators. So what we did is we built a web page. We've worked with several robots, which when you as a user you typed in a search from, for example, Santiago to Temuco at this day. Then we sent out these robots, which were customized for the few bus operator pages which were already online, and they basically replicated the search on the bus operator's webpage and waited for the results and brought back the results. So what we achieved in the beginning was an MVP that already could provide some sense of comparison of the available routes. And with this already, we could, I think, achieve 10,000 users organically in the beginning. And of course, for us, first, it was a huge confirmation of our assumption of the market potential. And in the end, these data were very helpful in order to convince bus operators to make a deeper integration and to sell the ticket immediately. But this, of course, was a total different challenge because the bus operators normally they're family owned, a bit more conservative, and they don't really see internet as a good sales channel. They thought of it like it's just a trend, which will pass again. So it was hard to convince them on that side, but we closed early on the second biggest bus operator in Chile and one big bus operator on a key route from Santiago to Talca. And with this, we could sell the first ticket back in January 2015.
So one of my friends from my round of Startup Chile was from Germany, and he was doing business development with very big Chilean companies. And the Chilean style of doing business clashed a lot with his German style of doing business, all the way to the level that when they first made him an offer for buying his product, he literally didn't say anything and just stood up and left because it was such a bad offer. And the Chileans had no idea what to make of that. What was it like doing business with, like you said, traditional family owned businesses who maybe hadn't ever done business with somebody, a foreigner before, and for you
Yeah.
guys doing business with traditional Chileans?
Yeah, I think in our case it's much more extreme because of course you have an average of ease of doing business in Chile, but then you get into our industry where normally the bus operators are family owned through generations, and normally a bus operator is founded by a driver who just discovered a huge opportunity on a specific route. So I would say it's even more extreme. So, for example, in the beginning, as Germans, today it sounds ridiculous, but we went to the countryside in order to get to the headquarters of this bus operator. And my co-founders Timon and Simon, they just arrived in their suits, like fresh from investment banks, and really were welcomed by no one. And I think hours later, someone showed up, the son of the owner, with just sweatpants and extreme actually situations that although the industry is like this, all these bus operators they have huge bus fleets of several hundred bus operators up to thousands of buses. So it's a huge industry, and of course for us it was a very special challenge to convince them. But we are really happy about our relationships with them today.
A lot of the both bus and plane booking softwares and marketplaces in Latin America have been started by foreign entrepreneurs. There's you guys. There's another one that I think the founders are from India. There's one that's from France in the flights booking, and I think in Brazil there's people from abroad as well. Why do you think that foreigners have been in these specific businesses and it hasn't been done locally before?
Yeah, I think the reason is that the foreigners normally come from circumstances where many of these challenges are already resolved. So they have an idea of how it should be done. And this is like a North Star, which guides them through the day and to just confirms a certain vision. I think that's very important. So for example, we started Recorrido in 2013, and then at that time you already had huge websites to compare flights, trains, everything. Of course, they continue to innovate until today, but I think that sense of how things should be done and how the traveler should not waste any time going to the terminal, but instead just book a ticket while he's in a cafe with his smartphone. So this sense of North Star I think is crucial in that sense.
You raised some money from angels back in Germany, and now how have you funded the business going forward, locally or from abroad or both?
It was actually both. So for us, it was always important to have local knowledge through an investor. So, but of course, as you know, it's especially at that time, it was quite difficult to raise any capital for e-commerce businesses in Chile. But still, we raised several rounds, and in total, we raised $1.4 million. All the rest basically was through our own business. We broke even very soon, just a few years after our product launch. So this, of course, helped us a lot, just growing organically, but still doubling our numbers each year.
What advice would you give to entrepreneurs looking to raise money for businesses in Latin America?
Yeah, I think looking back also at what I would do better if I were back then doing the same again. I would just say that I wouldn't wait on any investment. I would push much more on things that I can achieve today in the sense of just bootstrapping. I think many entrepreneurs they start thinking, okay, I could do this, but first I need an investment. Today, I would say that you can do at least as much just by bootstrapping and really leaning in. I think that's very important. And I think that's also something in the end the investor is looking for, that you have someone who's leaning in 100% in order to achieve this, if there's an investment or not.
And how did you decide after Chile what to do next? You started getting some traction in Chile. What about other countries in the region?
Yeah, so this problem of a very outdated infrastructure in the long distance bus industry is very common all over Latin America. So right from the beginning, we always looked at all the countries in Latin America, had an ear basically on the ground in each other market. So it was very interesting to see how other players are going head on with their challenges. But we definitely see still a lot of potential for Recorrido. So actually last year, Recorrido launched in Peru, which is a very similar market, and of course close to Chile as well. And I think this year we will open one or two countries more.
What do you think is the biggest challenge for entrepreneurs in general getting a business started in Latin America that would be surprising to people that aren't in the region?
Yeah, I think fundraising. So we always thought, of course, how's the fundraising environment in Europe? And even Europe is, I think, is still not at the level of the fundraising environment in the United States. So thinking of that of a business plan without pre-revenue, pre-traction, with a great business plan, you can already achieve a great financing round. But this is actually very unlikely still in Latin America, but I think it's getting much better. There have been some huge leapfrogs in the last years, and I think the second challenge is just to get all the people any form of payment. So I think there are very exciting fintech companies starting all over Latin America, which just solve this issue that many people still don't have a bank account. Maybe they never need any bank account, but they can tap into all these great solutions of e-commerce and online solutions.
So in the venture capital industry, they're starting to have its inflection point. So two stats that I saw on Twitter from Freddie Vega from Platzi is that more VC went to Colombia last year than to France. It's a little bit skewed because of Rappi's $1 billion investment, but it's starting to happen. And there's more companies that go through Y Combinator from Latin America each year than from Europe. So it's starting to change, but still it's a work in progress.
Yeah, very interesting. So actually, also when we decided to move from Germany to Chile, of course, it was also a huge bet on the region in general. And what we had some kind of notion when we left Germany that in general you already have not that much potential left. I think at that time also Peter Thiel launched his book From Zero to One, and I think there was a chapter about the growth of consultancy firms, and that was really interesting for me because we in Germany even very innovative companies that just started working with tons of consultancy firms. And what Peter Thiel, if I remember correctly, was saying that to see consultancy firms grow explosively, then you normally know that an ecosystem doesn't have much more to innovate. So when we compared it at that time with our experiences in Chile and abroad in Latin America, we just noticed that there are so many issues and challenges, which in other words are huge opportunities.
So you mentioned 0 to 1. What other books, blogs, podcasts, or documentaries do you like to recommend to people, whether about startups or just life in general?
I think it's always hard as a founder to just find the time to read, but I think it's very, very crucial just to see how other people are solving their challenges. So whenever I find time, I really like books from authors that talk about their own challenges without any filter. So what I really appreciated was especially the book from Ben Horowitz. I think it's called The Hard Thing About Hard Things. And I think they have some, I would say, controversial opinions. For example, many say that if you have raised the first round, the next financing rounds will be easier. But I think Ben Horowitz has it from Mark Andreessen that actually it's always getting harder. So you definitely have a different opinion on that in that sense. And the other book I really liked was from Phil Knight, A Shoe Dog, where he just describes how he founded his company Nike.
What advice would you give to foreign investors and entrepreneurs about why they should be looking at Latin America?
Yeah, I think Latin America is just a huge region with a lot of potential. You have a huge middle class, which just recently is waking up, improving their life conditions. And of course, they will request that many daily challenges they have will be solved. So this includes mobility, just shopping, very basic things. But of course, up to, for example, financing. I think Latin America, just in general, is a huge region with huge potential. Of course, there are challenges. So, for example, there's still some countries like Argentina with the currency issue, or Brazil with their just some difficulties in governing the country. Then you have Venezuela, but I think the upward trend is definitely there, and that's why we see so much interest in the region.
What's next for you and for Recorrido?
Yeah, so for us, it's very important to of course continue to grow in Chile, but also to expand through the region. So as I mentioned, the bus industry still is offline. We always estimate that only around 7% of all the tickets are sold online. So that's something that has to change as soon as possible. And we want to be, of course, this driving force behind it. And you definitely will see Recorrido in other countries in Latin America very soon.
Awesome. Well, it's going to be fun to watch you guys expand across the region. Thanks for providing this service, because it's definitely saved my my own skin multiple times on booking tickets. So thanks for doing it, and thanks for taking the time to do the podcast. I really appreciate it.
Thanks. It was a pleasure, Nathan. Take care.
Thanks again for listening to this episode of Crossing Borders with my conversation with Julian Deutschle, co-founder of Recorrido. If you like the podcast, please share it with a friend and give us a rating on iTunes or wherever you listen to your podcasts. Thanks to Angel, Sophia, and Josefina for helping produce this podcast and writing the show notes. And thanks to you for listening. Have a great rest of your day.